Hello and welcome to Retropower Uncut episode 260, which is going to be a little bit different this week because Nat and Cal are both on holiday, so we have taken over. We're going to try and do an overview of the E-Type in terms of all of its design work and the mentality for all of it, because it may look like on the surface that we do things for the sake of it, but we never do. There's always logic to it. So, going to try and get everything in. We've got notes. I'm not as good as Cal, I can't remember everything, and neither can Luke. So we've got notes to try and remember everything. We shall see. We're going to start with the exterior. So this process started a long time ago. I don't even know how long it was. It's been a bit of a long project, this one, because it's had so many different iterations and changes. But if we start with the front end, so effectively the ethos for this car is we wanted to create the perfect E-Type. The reason we went for a Series 3 rather than a Series 1, because everyone kind of prefers a Series 1, is size. So they're a lot more enjoyable to actually be in. I don't know if anyone's actually sat in a Series 1 E-Type, but they're quite cramped inside and really not actually the best place to be. They're quite romantic in that sense where they're quite uncomfortable, but really they're not that nice. So the Series 3 is a bit of a bigger car. It's a bit more roomy inside, a bit of a nicer place to be.
Comparatively, that is.
Comparatively, it is.
You'll notice a theme
still absolutely tiny.
Amongst most of the stuff that we design on this car. Trying to fit it in has been an absolute pain in the bumhole. But still, carry on.
Yeah, yeah. It's still a tiny car, and it's still like working on like an MX-5 that's been scaled down. But anyway, so we wanted to start with this Series 3 from that standpoint. Also, the customer wanted the V12, so it was obviously a bit more logical to go Series 3 because they came with a V12. It's not actually the original V12; it's a slightly later one from I think an X300. I'm sure Jamie's going to have to correct me on that one, but I think it's from an X300, so it's a little bit more displacement and just generally a little bit of a newer Jag V12.
Peppier.
A bit more peppy, exactly. So then we was left with the task of, okay, a Series 3 looks kind of crap, especially in comparison to a Series 1. Obviously, Series 1 is one of the best looking cars ever made. Well, debatable, but yes, I think it is.
Mr. Ferrari said that himself,
yeah,
so
Mr.
you
Ferrari
know
said
it's
that
true.
himself.
Jamie's wincing behind the camera.
Anyway, so we wanted to kind of elevate the look of the Series 3. We didn't want to just copy a Series 1 and make it look like a Series 1 with Series 3 underpinnings. So this is where we kind of ended up with it. Obviously, long-term viewers have kind of seen it's been a bit of a long process back forwards from me and Cal to customer to CAD to drawing to all sorts of different things. What we've ended up with is something that overall we've tried to keep the essence of a Series 3 while making it not look like we're trying to just copy a Series 1 or an Eagle or something like that, which is stereotypically beautiful cars. So the actual width of the car isn't actually any wider than the standard car, but I don't know if any viewers will know / remember, Jamie might be able to put a photo of a standard car. We've normally got a kind of flared arch on the edge of here, which again, the outside is actually in the same place. It would cut in, but we wanted to kind of create more of a muscular look for the overall aesthetic of the car. So that's what we've done on the front and the rear. We've kind of inflated the corners, if you like. They're not really corners, but this kind of area. When we got to this point, we was kind of thinking, right, what's going to be the best way of actually making this as a real car? Initially, we were thinking metal, but then after a seconds of thought, and to be fair, weighing the original bonnet, we decided to go the carbon route because the original bonnets weigh an absolute ton, and especially with the V12 in the front, it makes these cars incredibly front heavy. So the mentality was, okay, we'll go carbon, we'll do the entire thing. It will kind of bring the weight down over all of the car, but also the front end, and it also means that you can open the bonnet on your own, which you can't with the standard car because it is so heavy. So that's why we went carbon on the front. If we start then move our way back down the car, Luke will talk about the mirrors shortly, but carrying on with the bodywork, we then inflated the corners of the rear. Similar process to the front. We've kind of just fettled the whole body and kind of taken any bits we didn't really like out of it and tried to really, how do I put it, make it overall feel like a complete cohesive thing. Because what you see with a lot of cars that get body kits and modifications is the front doesn't necessarily match the rear. So obviously we wanted to keep that with the car. And also a point that's worth noting is at Retropower in general, we always try and keep cars looking like they could have come from the factory like this. So the ethos with everything from the Allegro to the Saab to this is if Jaguar had done an extra elevated version and it had come out now, what would it have looked like? And that's kind of what we aim for, and that's what we've aimed for with this.
Which is really difficult, by the way. I think a lot of people always think oh, like you want to put your stamp on it and you want people to know that's your car and everything. But actually the most challenging thing to do, and the thing that you really want to do, is people to look at it and go, that's probably the nicest E-Type I've ever seen, without necessarily going, that wasn't made by Jaguar.
Yeah, it's almost having an essence of someone who doesn't know anything about E-Types or Allegros or whatever, looking at that and going, oh, I don't remember them looking that good. I actually really like these. And then they go and Google it and they're like, oh, it's actually different, which we've tried to do with a lot of things. And again, the Allegros are quite a good example of that, where we've really tried to keep it with the essence of the original car and not look like it's just had a body kit slapped on it. But yeah, anyway, massive sidetrack. I'm inheriting some Nat here. Onto the rear end. So some people might be thinking, why have we gone carbon on the front and metal on the back? So I've said all about the weight benefits and everything with the front end. The key thing here is we're trying to keep this as smooth and as jointless as possible. So the original cars, all the seam lines have leaded joints. The problem with carbon when you're mounting it to metal is, I'm sure Nat's mentioned this before, you've got to have a bonded joint. And if you don't have a trim piece over that joint, it will then crack the paint, and then obviously that's ruined the aesthetic of your one-of-a-kind car. So we don't go carbon for the sake of it. For this application, it's worked perfectly. And also there's a thing with carbon is it's going to be mathematically a bit better in terms of being symmetrical. Obviously, the Jaguars aren't very symmetrical in the first place, which has made it a different challenge of making something which is symmetrical fit a car which isn't symmetrical. But with things that you're going to have an entire part for, doing it carbon does make sense, because you can make all the molds and it can all be one cohesive thing which all ties together, and you can then account for everything. Whereas on the rear end, these cars aren't very straight, especially when we scanned it. It's not had a crash or anything, it's just they're hand built, so they have got a level of twist to them. So the two reasons for going the rear end metal was, one, so we don't have to have that joint and create an imperfection we can't get around. There's certain cars on the market which have got carbon to metal joints and not got a trim panel over them, and then they're starting to have issues. So we're trying to avoid that, but then there's also an element of we need to actually make this car work, and to get the rear end of a carbon which is going to be symmetrical and perfect fit the car which isn't entirely perfect in terms of being millimetre perfect or fraction of a millimetre perfect, the metal was the better route to go, because you've got a little bit more room for kind of moving things about and making them all kind of talk to each other in a nicer way. The back of this car is still within millimetres of each other in terms of its being symmetrical, but we've had that leeway to kind of move things about and alter them to make sure it does actually come together and work. So that's the exterior of the car. I've ranted on a little bit. I'm now going to pass to Luke, where we're going to start talking about some of the smaller components on the car. Starting with the rear end. I'll let him go into it, to be fair. Pass it to Luke.
So thank you, George, and kicking off by saying what a fantastic job George has done on that redesign as well, because as you said right at the beginning, you want to look at this and go, I didn't know that this wasn't made by Jaguar in the first place, and I will say this is going to be one of the best looking E-Types I've ever seen in my entire life, which made the creation of this rear end terrifying, because George designed it all and it was looking fantastic, and we looked at the CAD and we went, wow, that looks awesome. And then Cal went, Luke, it's your job to make the buck to actually get this made. And I went, that's terrifying.
This is one of your trial by fire things, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And from start to finish, obviously I have George sat next to me as well, so he's always a massive help. But start to finish, it wasn't actually that much of a long thing to do. It's essentially like making one of those kids, like a cardboard dinosaur things where you have to slot the pieces together to make the dinosaur in its simplest form. And what we did is we just made lateral pieces and longitudinal pieces. They all slot together and they kind of form the outer shape of the buck. You'll get renders from Jamie so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And then also we made blocks to form the important areas, like the number plate recess, the shape that we wanted for that, the specific arch shape, and then they could be slotted into place on that buck. And then, you kind of get the end result here. I thought I'd mention that because it is quite an interesting thing, obviously looking at how a carbon part is made at the front with the molds and everything, and then looking how a metal part is made for the rear. Two wildly different ways requiring two wildly different bits of design work to get to the end result. But the end result is fantastic. And then since that point, since getting the rear end back, we've kind of been plugging in the holes for the parts that you need within that. So I think the first main one is the rear tail light and chrome strip design. What you see here is a prototype of the rear tail light itself. I'll send Jamie some renders so you can actually see the entire package rendered onto the car itself.
That's only part of it.
That's only part of it, yes.
And just to clarify, whenever there's a part, because some people say, why are you making these parts from plastic? If it's ever this colour, it's just a prototype. And to be honest, a lot of the parts we create using 3D prints first. I think these are going to be made from carbon, aren't they? Yeah, the final versions will be made from carbon. It won't be a multi-piece. I just thought it's a point I'd add, because there's always a comment saying, oh, why are you making this from plastic? Normally we're not, especially if it's this colour. Obviously we do. There is definitely components we use 3D printing for, which as we get our way down the car, you'll see the final product is going to be a 3D print. But stuff like this, these are only prototypes. This is just part of the prototype. So yes,
and,
pass my Luke.
When George says 3D print as well, we're not actually printing the final parts in PLA plastic, which is what this bright material is. I'm sure Nat's mentioned this a million and one times in various videos, but we use a carbon nylon 3D printing filament, which is temperature rated up to something ridiculous like 270 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
So we are fairly sure that unless the car is on fire, at which point you're probably having other issues rather than the 3D prints in it, you're going to be okay using it. So as George said, this is a prototype of the rear light itself. This here is a prototype of the rear light housing. So as George said, these are going to get made in carbon, and then they're actually going to get bonded onto the rear of the metalwork here. 2 reasons. Number one, it's actually semi-structural for the holes that these actually go into. As you can imagine, the minute I take this out, there is going to be a slight amount of flex where it's just, I think it's like 1.6 millimeters thick. And at that point, these are going to close up slightly. So we want something to bond on there to kind of create a level of structure. So that's aperture for the light stays the same shape when you take them in and out again. It's also going to have a level of waterproofing as well. You're going to have a seal going around this anyway to prevent any water going in, but it also is just an extra step to prevent elements getting inside of the car. So as George said, this one here, it has a split in it because our 3D printers can only print up to a certain size. We need to be able to reattach them, but that rib won't be there in the final one. And in the actual CAD model, which we send off to the composite company, this flange is a lot bigger, so it can be trimmed back to size later on. But other than that, it will come back looking pretty much like what this is, but in carbon fiber and not fluorescent green. So that's kind of touching on the rear lights in how, what they are. Design-wise on this one, it was a tricky one because you really don't want to ruin the lovely shape of the rear end by the rear light design. You have to strike a really fine balance of having something that looks really cool is kind of the best way to put it, and a little bit different, but also kind of into keeping for something that you would see on an E-Type. So I think where we started was it's a very long and sleek car, and we wanted the rear lights to kind of fit in with that. We didn't want to run bumpers on it, so in the final one, you're actually going to have a thin chrome strip that runs all the way along here and bridges these two, tapering at the same rate as what this light does down to a point here. And that kind of mimics the bumper that you would have had. And then really thin lights, which are going to have quite bright LEDs in them, to kind of, again, emphasize the sleekness, the elegance of this car, and kind of transform it into something which looks correct, but still has that kind of, I don't want to say modern twist to it, because it's not a modern twist.
It's not really though, is it? It's being sympathetic to the original.
Exactly.
Like,
yes,
obviously,
that's a good way of putting it.
We want to keep harking back to the fact that it is a Series 3. We don't want to try and make it look like a Series 1, because in the initial design phases, we thought about just putting single lights here, or similar to a Series 1 light, or similar to what Eagle does, for example. But ultimately, it's a Series 3. We want to keep it looking like a Series 3, or at least feeling like a Series 3. So on the Series 3, they have these big swooping bumpers, which are frankly too big. And it's obviously got these big square plinths that come down and got these big gaudy lights, which I'm pretty sure were done for the American market, or at least the bigger bumpers were. So through the ideation and as Luke developed the design, we've tried to keep that feeling like a Series 3 is kind of coming back through the design.
Yeah. And it's implementing modern features in a classic way. So exactly. Where it's going to look very classic on the outside, still going to have kind of like the sequential lights and startup, all of these different things that the client wanted, but again, implementing in a way that feels correct to the car. The next kind of thing that is of the same ilk actually, of implementing things in a way that feels true to the car by almost hiding it, is the client wanted a reverse camera on this. You're spending a lot of money on a car, you want to know what you're reversing into. So this cutout here, and I will provide Jamie with renders so you can see what I'm on about, is going to have a plate which sits there, and we love a bit of multifunction here. It's going to be a rear camera, an emergency boot pull, and also a trickle charger for the car, because again, this is a weekend car, it's not going to be used as a daily. You want to have that feature on a car like this, and that is all housed within this realm here. And you're wondering, but Luke, that's where the number plate is going to go. How will you ever access that? I'm going to have to unscrew my number plate every single time. Obviously not, no, we've thought about this. We're going to do a flip up number plate, very James Bond style. When it's down, it's going to look very classic. You probably wouldn't even realize that it's a flip up plate. It's going to be slightly smaller than average, but it's going to look like a number plate. And then you'll have two options. You're going to have a button essentially to flip it up manually, but also you're going to have, when you put it in reverse, that flips up, camera activates, and now you can see what you're reversing into. That is done through a little actuator that sits just up here, and that pivots a rod which comes through here, and then that just literally pivots it 90 degrees up. Again, I have CAD, I'll send it to Jamie, so you can see that. That's all been prototyped now. That all works lovely, and yeah, we can actually probably pretty soon go ahead with making the final parts for that, and then kind of storing them for when this is painted and through the other side. But yeah, again, it's one of those things where we want to keep it classic looking, but the client wants a few modern comforts that you would have in a lot of other cars. So we've implemented that in a way which looks classic, but you can still have them, as you can see the recurring theme here. Cool. I think that's where I'm going to leave it for the rear end for now. So the mirrors, another thing that can really make or break the car, because again, really lovely design by George in the exterior of the car. You don't want to slap something on the side of it which is going to ruin basically how it looks. So start where we always start, look at the originals. There's a chrome trim that runs all the way along here, chrome trim that runs up here, and then the original had this almost sword-like blade which ran down the top of the door here. So we started with that, and I did a couple variations where you had that blade going all the way down, and played around with the mirror mounts coming off of that, played around with various different mirror shapes which were quite classic. We very quickly decided on the fact that that looks too heavy on the car. It's not a feature we particularly liked on the original car, and we wanted to do a nod to that, but we didn't like, again, how heavy it looked on the side of the door. It's quite a short door in itself, and that's quite a lot of chrome to have on it. So what we did is we shortened that strip down to about 12 inches, about 30 centimeters, and then made that into the mirror mount itself. And then, as I said, I played around with a few different options for mirror shape, and it kind of landed in a place where it was not only looked good and incorporated the chrome on the lower half with this quite cool body colored cap on it, but functioned well. As I said with some of the stuff on the rear of the car, the client wanted a lot of modern features within these mirrors alone. A sensor for the door so you're not opening the door into anything. He wanted all the adjustment he wanted in like a really clean way, and he needed a button for opening up the door, and all these different things that basically need to be incorporated into what is actually a fairly compact size. And so where the mirrors landed is somewhere that not only looks good, but functions really well as well. And I'm really happy with these. These are at a stage now where I can actually go and do a final prototype. We can get the sensor that we want to use ordered, and we can put together something to, number one, show the client, but also create mounting points and all this sort of stuff off of. So I'm really happy with these. It's probably my favorite mirror design that I've done so far at Retropower. And yeah, I think that's it. I think I'm going to let George talk a little bit about the fuel filler cap.
Yeah, so one of the benefits of designing the entire car is we have the facility, especially when you're changing the bodywork this drastically, you can really change like every element of the car if you want to. One of the ones we've decided to change is where the fuel cap is. So originally they're in a big flap that sits on the top of the wing. It looks a bit ugly. It's a bit, you know, it looks a bit cumbersome. It looks a bit like an afterthought, frankly. So we was racking our brains of where we want to put that. we had the customer here at the time, and we was trying to figure out, okay, where's going to be a nice place to do it? And we thought, okay, could we just put a nicer version of the original flap on the wing? We wasn't really happy with that. We thought, could we put it kind of a flap here? And we went around all these different designs. What we've ended up is similar to a Porsche, which is putting the fuel cap in the middle, which has a few benefits. First of all, the tank is directly under here, so it means we can fill it from the middle, and you can get a higher spot in the tank, meaning we can have actually a higher capacity. Another little benefit is because it's in the middle, you can fill it up from both sides, which is quite a handy thing, especially, well, everyone's been there, you're waiting for a pump, there's one for the other side of the car, now you can do it from either side. What it's also allowed us to do is create or use a design we've used on other projects, which is a billet cap, effectively, which has an internal O-ring, similar to what I've been doing in the E-Type tanks, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. Where the cap screws down, but then always aligns itself perfectly to where you've set it to, which is a design we've kind of evolved over the years, and we're getting to a point now where it's having a almost 100% success rate in terms of how we do it. The latest versions do have that. This is the slightly older version. It still works perfectly. It just means it's got a bit more jeopardy when it comes to actually welding everything in. The jeopardy has been done. It has been 100% successful. But yeah, the latest version doesn't have quite as much jeopardy. But effectively, it's just a very small element of design which we think elevates the car just that little bit. And that's kind of the ethos with all of our cars, especially this car, which is all these little things add up to then create this car which we're trying to be the best E-Type ever made, effectively. And that was really kind of the driving force for all the projects, and this car included.
There's also a fun little tidbit with this one, which kind of highlights why having a CAD department is good in a emergency situation. We had the client around for this car, and through no fault of his own, he couldn't quite wrap his head around the center filler cap being a good idea. Predominantly to do with aesthetics, he thought it'd look a little bit odd, and we were having this moment where Cal and him were going round and round in circles about the placement of this, and me and George were like, oh, we really think this is the correct idea. So we literally just, whilst the client was talking to Cal, ran upstairs, rendered it quickly in CAD, and then came down and showed him, and he was like, well, that looks fantastic, let's do that. And then that's why it's in the middle now, because sometimes you just need to see something.
You just need to see something, yeah.
A lot of the work that we do is visualization, so the client has a good idea of what their car is going to look like, and there's not going to be any nasty surprises, or you're not asking them just to trust you on something. You can actually give them evidence for why something looks good, and that's exactly something we did with that.
And to fair, that leads on perfectly to the next part, which is the process of design. So we normally start with sketching, a little bit less now, but we still do a chunk of sketching and initial ideation stuff, especially when it comes to dramatic changes. So some stuff we just make, like the mirrors, for example. Luke can model them so quickly that it doesn't make sense to sketch it. You just go straight into the CAD. He can have a scratch model, which is a really basic model, within the space of half an hour. Then there's no point for sketching. But for certain things which we're not so sure about, which will take a lot longer to model, we use Photoshop and sketching and all these different methods. So the exterior design was initially done by, I can't remember his name, I'm going to have to insert a name here, but Harvey, can't remember his name, we'll insert a name. But yeah, it gives the client an idea of what they're going to get before they spend a lot of time, and we spend a lot of time developing an idea which they might not like. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. So an idea we did develop quite far, but then actually didn't end up using, was initially we was actually not going to have a roof on this car at all. It was going to have provision for the hard top to be taken on and off, but no soft top kept in the car. What we was initially thinking was we was going to have this big hoop, which we've talked about before, but I'm going to just go over it again. This hoop which was sat inside the body, recessed flush, which when you're driving the car with no roof at all or anything like that, it's down. It's just part of the body and just kind of looks like a nice accent and detail. But if you do get caught in the rain, it was actually going to pivot from around here and pop up, and then we was going to have some mounts within the trough that was going to sit, that then created something called a bikini top. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's pretty much a piece of material which stretches from the back to the front and creates an emergency way of not getting covered in water.
It's well bloody cool is what it is.
It was going to look really cool. We're quite sad that we didn't get to do it, but pretty much we did all the sketching, which I'll give to Jamie. Client was like, yeah, let's push forward with this. We did a load of CAD, well, I did a lot of CAD work on it to get it all working in a certain way, and it was going to potentially pop up in a crash. Don't know if we was going to end up doing that in the end, but yeah. Got it all modelled, got it all rendered, and then the client came back and was like, actually, I've had a change of heart. That isn't what I want to, that isn't the route I want to go. And that's just part of it. It's something we can offer here, which most places can't, which is designing something and then the client can go, actually, can we just change this? Which is pretty heartbreaking when that happens, and we don't like it when that happens, but that's part of the process.
It is important to mention though, because at the end of the day, this is their it's their build. I think I mentioned this in a video 2 weeks ago, where this is at the end of the day their build, and we may throw some really good ideas at them, but as George said, one of the beauties about coming to us and getting something made, so at any point you can go, I don't like this, let's change this, and we can change it. It's
within reason. We tried to set hard limits of things like colour and design and all this kind of thing, but this was one of those rare cases where we went down a route and it didn't pan out. It was down to different opinions. Obviously, me and Luke and the CAD department and Cal quite liked this idea, but then the customer didn't. So that's why we've now not done it. And ultimately, like Luke just said, it's their car. It's a one of one. It's being built for them. So it needs to be fitting what they want. Moving on to from the one of one is obviously the interior.
Yes. So this is definitely one of one, as in there's absolutely nothing original in this whatsoever, but in the best way possible.
Yeah. So we've not just done this for the sake of it. Anyone who knows any E-Type interior it's a pretty hodgepodge of things that are kind of just thrown in, and it feels like someone just made it in a shed, frankly. So again, like we've had with different parts of the design, it started with sketches. I then did the ideation phase of it, so really roughing out what we wanted it to kind of generally look like. And then I got moved on to different projects, and then it got handed over to Luke, where he carried it on. This
was definitely a Willy on block scenario for me, because I hadn't done any major surfacing by this point whatsoever, and then this was handed to me and gone, hey, you've got to do this, it's got to be right, there's no prototyping, and it's very expensive, so don't get it wrong. And
there was some hand-holding as well.
There was a fair amount of hand-holding as well, mostly for me crying the entire time, but no, I'm joking. It was actually a very fun process for me. I learned a lot from it, and the end result looks mega, so I'm very happy. There is a full interior design, obviously, but what you see here is the dash panel itself. Again, fully surfaced by us, sent off to a composite company. They make it, we get it back. Then we make all the brackets for it, which is what Scott's been doing an excellent job on for the last few weeks now. So that's now fully mounted in there. I then also had the job of taking the concepts, like design of it, and then implementing the different instruments, the different switches, all the different components that we need into it. The main feature, I think, on this one probably being the flip-up screen. So, as I mentioned for two of the previous parts, this client wanted some modern features in his car without necessarily it looking modern or being massively obvious that it is. It's quite difficult to implement a massive screen without it looking like a massive screen unless you hide it. So in a similar fashion to the flip-up number plate, I've actually used the exact same linear actuator that uses to create a flip-up screen. So when it's down, it matches the contour of the dash perfectly. And then when you flip that down, it forms the lower panel for so you're not seeing down into the dash region. And you can actually have a look at the screen there. You've also then got a Motec screen down here to display your engine data, because again, this is a very custom vehicle, you want to know what's going on with it. And then over kind of like the next few weeks, or the next things that I'm doing with this car pretty much is going to be finalizing the rest of the interior and getting it ready to make. So all of the bezels that sit around the shifter, the switches, the rear section of the center console, that all needs finalizing. Again, we've sent renders to the client, they're really happy with it, but there's a step after that to make them into final parts to make. And that's kind of where we're at now. The door cards as well, I'll send Jamie a render of. They flow in from this corner dash into the top section of the door card, and that takes it all the way along. got some funky speaker grills on there. It's going to be different trim blocks, and yeah, it's just going to look really cohesive. As George said, the original interiors are a little bit hodgepodge. This client is a fan of his Bentleys, so those two things don't really go together. So what he wanted was not a Bentley interior, but a Bentley level interior inside of his E-Type, and that is what I think we've pretty much delivered, or delivered in concept at the minute, and will deliver in reality when it gets to it. So again, that's just listening to the client, understanding what he wants, understanding the things that he likes, and implementing it in a way that feels correct to the car. And it's ended up in a nice place, because when you actually sit in this car, even with just this in at the minute, it feels like it hugs you almost. It's not cramped, but it creates a cockpit, and I think that's really cool. So I think I'm going to leave it there for the interior, because I'd rather leave a little bit of mystery in terms of what the final thing's going to look like, because I do think it's going to be quite a piece, this. So yeah, I think I'll end that there and then move on to the engine bay side of things.
Okay, so the engine bay. Another part of the car which has changed dramatically from original. Like I mentioned earlier, it's still a V12, it's a slightly later one, but we've elevated it, shall we say. So I'm going to try and make sure I get everything in, but it's going to be a bit chicken and egg in terms of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with the intakes. So initially we've converted it to individual throttle bodies for two reasons: performance and sound. We've then developed the idea, because we're trying to get this car to be a real GT refined car, and having 12 individual throttle bodies, all with individual connections and everything like that, we've learned from previous projects such as the Escorts, they're very hard to balance. With 4 it's okay, but with 12 we could foresee a lot of issues with that. So what we've actually done is convert it to 2 individual 87mm throttle bodies, which then go into these plenums, which we've designed in-house. Again, we always try to kind of balance the engineering changes with the visual. These intakes, we kind of had a vision of how we wanted them to look. They're a multi-piece design. I'll go into them specifically in another video. But the main reason was we need to convert it to 2 throttle bodies, but we want to keep this beautiful individual setup, which is, we're still using the runners from Gen V, but we're just not using the actual individual throttle bodies. So the injectors will fit into these areas here. We've also got some hidden sensor mounts underneath the airbox, which will house things like, I've forgotten everything that's in there, like an air pressure sensor, for example. There's a couple of other bits. We're also going to have some balance pipes and bits like that. But yes, then another issue we have, or you have with the standard car, is they just intake the air from the engine bay, which is terrible as soon as the car gets warm, because, or sat still especially, is you're feeding the air with hot engine. Anyone who knows anything about engines, that's not what you want to be doing. It's less efficient. You're not going to be getting as much power, efficiency, all that kind of stuff. So we were thinking, okay, how can we get cold air to the intakes? Which is how we've ended up with this setup. So we're doing obviously a carbon exterior of the bonnet. We needed to do a carbon interior. So what we've actually done is built in an intake into the actual inner skin of the bonnet, which will then be molded in and then output near the top of the bonnet here, which Jamie's going to now rotate around elegantly and show. So the air will actually come through here. It'll go through some ducts that come down from the front, up through this U channel, which will have another part that bolts on the inside, and then come through here. Another thing we wanted to make sure we had was filters. So again, with individual throttle bodies, if we just went that route, there's no real way of filtering them in the space we've got. So what we've done is this arrangement where this hole in the body will then clamp down to these holes on the airboxes. These airboxes have then got air filters inside of them. So the cold air will feed the air filters, and then we've got a flexi hose internally, which goes from the throttle body to the air filter, so there's no way of any dust or crap getting into the actual the engine, because obviously there's some big holes here, you can get your hands into them. So we wanted to have the filters after that, which is a design which took a bit of fettling, but we've gotten there and I'm quite happy with it now. And that's all disassemblable. And also, this, going back to what you were saying earlier, this is actually a part which is going to be 3D printed. Whether it will be printed in-house or outsourced to somewhere like ProTotal, like Cal did a tour of last week, I think it was. It's really depending on what the application is, depends what we make it from. So stuff like this, where it doesn't need to have very much strength to it, it really realistically only needs to be able to withstand about 100 degrees. it's a perfect applicant for 3D printing it. And that also gives us a lot more flexibility with the design. So we've added a lot of elements into this which just wouldn't be possible if we did it in any other way. So it's got lots of custom details on the inside for drains and holding the filters and and seals and all this kind of thing, and clips, and all of this wouldn't really be possible without being able to 3D print it. So this is a perfect example of why we use 3D printing as a final part sometimes. If we was an OEM, we'd probably use an injection molded part, but that is incredibly expensive, especially for a one-off, so we're not doing that. Moving on from those.
Before you do, I think this is also a fantastic one to point out that to some people, I think they'll look at this and go, they've done this because it looks good. And it looks fantastic, but once George has actually explained like just the levels of reasoning to why we've had to do this, you're like, oh wait, this not only looks awesome, there is actually like so many reasons why we've actually done it. And yeah, it's just landed in such a fucking cool place. Like, look at it.
Yeah,
it's
no,
cool.
we're happy with how it's looking. But yeah, it's a very valid point. Just because normally, especially me, Luke's a bit better at it, Cal's even better at it, we explain why we've done things. It's never just for the sake of it. We always do everything. There's a rhyme and a reason for it. And we also try and incorporate as many elements into something if we're redesigning it. A perfect example of that is the tank on that side, which I talked about. Might have been, no, probably was 2 weeks ago actually, where if we're redesigning something, we try to make it do more than one job. That is an example where it's doing a silly amount of jobs. So that is the pedal box. It's also the the breather tank, sorry, for the engine. It's also the brake reservoir tank. It's also the washer tank. There's a lot going on there, and I've almost shocked myself at how much is going on there. It also hides a load of wires and everything, but if we're making a big billet thing to do one job, which we needed to convert it to the pedal system we want to run, to then match all the gearbox and everything, we again try and have it do multiple jobs. We needed all of those tanks to go in the engine bay somewhere, something which has been an ongoing battle with this car, which we haven't really mentioned that much of, is how small it is and getting everything in and it looking as clean and tidy and refined as possible. If we're going to go to this extent of changing everything, we want it to be the best it physically can be. Condensing everything into one big tank, it's obviously not one tank, it's broken up, and a point to note, which I saw in the comments before, is the concern about the heat management of all these different parts going together. There is an air gap between the brake reservoir and the rest of the tanks. So if anything, there's going to be definitely a heat discrepancy from the brake fluid to the breather tank. That breather tank's not going to get that hot anyway, but equally, it's actually going to do us a favour because really you want your brake fluid to have a certain level of heat in it because it keeps the moisture out. And it'll also heat the washer fluid, which again is very handy because then you haven't got a frozen washer tank. But yeah, so we try and have things do multiple jobs if we can, and that is the perfect example of that. That does so many different things, which I'm not going to go into any more detail on because I've talked about it multiple weeks in a row. But yes, something which we were also trying to do with this engine bay, completely changing the topic, is keeping it as symmetrical as possible. So with it being a V12, we've been able to do that. Things like the intake, they're actually not, it's the same intake, it's not symmetrical. And what we've done is offset the throttle body very slightly to the left for me. Well, for you it'll be to the right. Meaning that when you look down the centre line of the car, even though these banks are offset, the actual throttle bodies are in line. And it's just kind of having that general sense of a big overview of the car. We try to do it with everything. The engine bay is just an easy way of kind of showing that. And another thing for that is the AC, which is this, which fitting this has been an absolute nightmare, but I think we've got there, which is it's an AC system we've designed in-house. Part of it is exterior on the car. This is all going to be 3D printed as well as a final. This isn't the final, this is from PLA. Another part of it is in the footwell, which is buried deep where you're not going to kick it, and then Matt's done a lovely cover panel for that. But visually we tried to make this look the same as the tanks. Obviously currently it doesn't look the same, but what we've done is a cover which is on something called quick mount, so it just pops off, which covers those tanks, so it then has the same aesthetic as the AC. And it's just, again, that was one of those things which it's a little bit extra, but the customer wanted to kind of keep this engine bay as refined and as functional as possible. We thought there was a bit too much design discrepancy not having a cover on that. And also we've done that. It's going to cover up everything in terms of the tanks. The caps are still going to poke through, but it's going to just make the engine bay look super symmetrical, and we're trying to do that with everything really, and have the whole thing look like this kind of cohesive, talking together type thing. Something which kind of doesn't have as much of a aesthetic sense to it is some of the more mechanical parts, which Luke's going to end with, which are down on the front.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into massive detail on this, but I'm going to mention it because of all the stuff that we've mentioned so far is the big bits. That doesn't even scratch the surface of everything. When you really consider every bezel in the interior, every handle, every small component that's needed.
Custom clipped,
every custom clip. This housing here, which houses the Alpine control unit, and is also the HVAC ducting to bring it from the bulkhead through to the cabin. There are so many small parts which also need to be custom manufactured. In this engine bay, for example, the alternator mount and the AC compressor mounts are a fantastic example of this. HVAC sits on this side. Originally, AC compressor sits on that side.
There was no AC at all with the original car.
AC. Well,
so yes,
we have to have. Long story short, we have to have a AC compressor on this side where the alternator used to be. So what does that need? That needs a custom billet mount to be able to mount that to the engine itself. Then what do you do with the alternator? Well, that now needs to go on the other side. So you also need a custom mount for that. So we've actually designed 2 mounts for that as well to mount both those things in place. The steering rack mounts are custom. This little mount up here is custom. You can, if we had everything on this car, at one point, it would look like a very colourful kids car ride because of the amount of prototyping and stuff that just needs to be done for it.
E-Type Harlequin.
E-Type Harlequin. There you go. VW made the E-Type. What a shocker that would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I think, again, important to mention because there's all the glitz and the glam and the big bits, but then there's also all of the necessary mechanical pieces that you need, which might not look as cool, but is still a consideration for us the entire way
elevate
through.
the design, and that's ultimately what we want to do. Every element that has even got a level of compromise to it, we were trying to elevate it and bring it up. So something which I'm working on right now, which I probably won't have any B-roll of because I'm literally doing it as we speak, well, as in about 5 minutes when we stop filming, is all the bonnet catch release mechanism. So on this car, it's really compromised as standard. The bonnets, if you don't have 2 people, the bonnet actually clips it on a standard car. Which is suboptimal because then you smash paint off and it's horrible. So we're actually changing this whole operation down here, which to make it so the whole thing's moved inboard and just it's effectively the original design in terms of how it works, but everything's moved about a little bit just so it works in a much nicer way. And that's the essence of everything we do here, whether it's this car or Saab or the Allegro. It's elevating everything to try and get rid of those annoying imperfections, still keeping the charm and the quirks in elements of the design, but anything that is an imperfection, in our opinion, trying to pull that out and really kind of make it this ultimate experience for what that car could and should be. So yeah, I think we're going to leave it here. Again, like Luke said, there's a lot of stuff we have missed because we don't want to be doing a 3-hour video, and our brains are only so big and we can't remember like Cal can. So
and this is only one car, remember?
This is only one car. If you like this, put it in the comments and we'll do this for each build. This car is quite a drastic example because it's had so much design put into it, and some cars are a lot less than that. But equally, most of the cars have had a huge amount of design put into them, whether it's from me or Luke or it's from the guys in Metal Shop. Because that's worth noting is me and Luke do all the CAD stuff, but a lot of design work happens on the shop floor, whether that's Nat, Matt, Bobby, Scott, whoever. It's such a big process and a team effort. It's such a cohesive group of people we have here, which all add to that kind of mixture of creating these perfect cars.
So ridiculously talented as well. The amount of times that I come in here to scan something, to check something, and I spot one of these guys doing something, and I'm just so taken aback by the talent that is involved with doing it, is almost on a daily basis. So I think it is really important to highlight that it's not just me and George having a design input on it. We just do the computer design side of stuff and then help along the way as well with that.
It's also just backwards and forwards.
So backwards and forwards, yeah. Which is nice why everyone gets along and everyone's a good team, really.
And it also means that the next design we always do is always an improvement over the last. So like a little example of this is how we was going to assemble all of this. I got it all designed, I was all happy with it, and then had it milked up in the car and was like, I can't get that bolt out when this is in. So then we was like, okay, that's going to be a pain for assembly. So what we've done is create a little hole in this mount so you can get an Allen key all the way through and undo it. And it's just little things like that which you wouldn't get if we couldn't talk to assembly or they couldn't give their opinions. It means me and Luke get shouted at every now and again,
you know.
but that's part of the process. But yeah, no, I think we're going to leave it there because we've talked long enough. We're going to hand over now. Well, we're not going to hand over now. Go check out the Den's video, which should have also just been released. I think that's everything we've covered. So yeah, thank you for watching. Let us know if you've liked this kind of me and Luke special, and we'll do more if you like it.
Yeah, we'll come up with the formats to keep doing this because it's
cool. We've enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you for watching.